Um, the original sin, if we can borrow a religious reference, in fundraising, in our view, is believing that people give because we ask. And that necessarily breeds a lot of asking. And I expect most everybody on this webinar today has seen the consequence of the volume model as we refer to it. Response rates are going down, costs are going up, and diminishing returns are setting in. And we've, as a sector anyway, made this volume model even less personal and less meaningful with a one-size-fits-all approach. And the answer to that, or part of the answer to that, is the need to dig deeper on the psychology of decision-making. Why do people give? And recognizing that it's different answers for different people. Now, most fundraising messaging, or a formula, if you will, or a taxonomy, tends to follow the same pattern. We've got the organizational brand is reflected in the messaging. Think of that as kind of being on one side of that formula. And then on the other side, where we put a lot of energy and time, is picking program A, B, or C to highlight, or issue X, Y, or Z to talk about. That's on the other side. And in the middle, if you're envisioning kind of a bookshelf, you've got just hope, hope stacked in between. And we call this bookend fundraising, which is heavily focused on who we are as an organization and what we do. And we're leaving this empty space on that bookshelf, which is where the donor's personal story should be. And that is the problem. We know from all of our research that the only kind of giving that lasts, that's sticky, where people feel a sense of psychological satisfaction, meaning they feel good about their giving, the only type of giving that's sticky is autobiographical. So it's about the donor's sense of self, which we call identity. It's about their personality profile and all the values and goals and emotions that tend to go with all of that. So our short answer to, or the alternative answer to why people give is not because we ask, but they give because it's their story, not ours. And this session is going to talk about how we can insert their story into the messaging.
And to make something clear, this isn't a new idea. We're not saying this is a new idea. We all know and appreciate that if you match the message to who the donor is, you'll increase response and engagement. What we do differently is how we define who the donor is. We don't use demographic or giving data, which doesn't tell us anything about why they support the mission. Instead, we focus on what you can see on screen, identity and personality, which is the core motivation for support. Okay, before we dig into the examples and the practical bits, which are the most interesting, we need to have a brief introduction on the concepts so you can follow better. So starting with personality. Personality describes how we process information and how we interact with the world. And there are many different personality tests out there, like what color are you, which Disney princess you are, and so on. These are great for fun and team building. But if you're really interested in your personality, then you need to use the Big 5 trait assessment to find out who you are. It's the most valid and comprehensive theory based on decades of research. And according to it, our personality can be described by the 5 traits that you can see on screen. And personality is fixed. It's we're born with it, and unfortunately, we can't change it much. So this is who we are, and we have to accept it and love ourselves. So what each trait means is, first of all, it's not binary. It's not you're either extroverted or introverted. It's a scale. You can score high, low, or anywhere in between on each of these traits. And in combination, that makes up your personality. Very, very briefly, people who score high in openness are more intellectually curious. They push boundaries. They like to be challenged, and they have higher aesthetic appreciation. They might see beauty when others might not. Conscientious people, they are more organized. They value efficiency, hard work. They respect authority, and they value loyalty to the in-group. However, that's defined any given time. The in-group can be your family, your country, the human race. Extroverted people, well, we all know what that means: high energy, the life of the party, impulsive characteristics. Agreeable people, they are polite, they try to avoid confrontation, and they are the natural helpers. They tend to say yes to all requests, which is why our job as fundraisers is to protect them. People who score high in neuroticism, they tend to experience a high level of negative emotions: sadness, fear, anxiety. So any message that will help reassure them will resonate with that audience. And that's the reason why we talk about personality. Any message that is tailored to match your donor's personality will resonate. It increases chances that it will be seen, processed, and responded to. So personality is the first ingredient in our formula. The next layer is moral frames. There are these 6 moral frames that help us interpret, evaluate, and interact with the world. And different contexts require a different moral frame. For example, an advocacy organization should frame the message around a fairness, equity moral frame. An international relief organization should use a care or reduce harm moral frame. And the same goes for personality traits. For conscientiousness, as an example, focusing on in-group loyalty, purity, and respect authority makes more sense than care or fairness. The opposite is true for agreeable people. So the mission and the donor's personality, they already help guide the decision on which moral frame to use. Next layer, emotion. And again, we're not the first to say use emotion in your appeals. Everyone says make it emotional. What does that mean? What we bring to the table is structure. We try to identify the emotion that is the most suitable for any given combination of personality and moral frame. And you can see here an illustrative table list. It's not meant to be comprehensive, but you get the idea. Okay, looking enough with the theory, let's take a break. Looking at this ad, this is tailored to people who score high in openness using a sanctity moral frame. People high in openness, they're intellectually curious, they like to learn new information, challenge themselves, grow. So that's why the ad starts with facts. Facts that maybe they already know, but if they don't, they would appreciate. So we start telling them about the number of countries that violate basic human rights. And then we combine that with a sentence that focuses on the sanctity of human life to bring in the moral lens into the messaging. Now let's see how we can tailor the same mission and the same sentiment to agreeable people. Let's see how we can also bring emotion into play. So let's start with moral lens of care harm using compassion as emotion. Here's how the ad would look like for that audience. Immediately you notice that there is no fact sharing. We don't have any new information there. We're not trying to teach them anything new. We start with the emotion. Your compassion can make a difference. And then we continue with a story. We share a quote that depicts the situation. If we moved, we were beaten and kicked. So immediately you can see the stark difference between the two ads because we tailored it to completely different donor motivations. But even if you keep the trait the same, say we still tailor to high agreeable people, but this time we use the fairness, equity, moral lens and the gratitude as an emotion. Again, the ad will look completely different. And here's an example. We're lucky to be able to freely voice our opinion without a second thought. Let's show our appreciation for our own good fortune by helping, etc. So you see here how gratitude is able to implicitly talk about the unfairness rather of the situation without having to explicitly call it out. You can do that, but because this emotion is so suitable for this moral lens and this trait, we don't even have to. We can be subtle with that while focusing on the emotion. The next ingredient to our formula is donor identity. Now, again, a little bit of theory. We all have many different identities. Here you can see some of my identities. And each identity is associated with different values and goals. Some identities we're born with. Our nationality is a good example. Other identities we choose, like our profession or having a pet or not. And other identities are just imposed on us. No one ever asked me if I wanted to be an aunt, right? Or for a more, to go down a darker path, no one would ever choose to be a cancer survivor. So we have all of these identities, but not all of them are active at the same time. They are context dependent. Right now, all of our professional identities are active. And once an identity is active, it can influence our choices and our behavior. And that's why it's important. That's why we talk about it here, because in the context of fundraising, priming and activating the donor identity, which is their innate reason they support a mission, is going to change how they engage with your messaging. So personality is how we interact and process information. Donor identity is the part of the donor that connects them to your mission. It's their values and goals and beliefs that align with your mission. That's the reason they give, not because you ask them, it's because they want to express who they are. And they don't have to give to a charitable organization to do that. For example, an environmentalist, they can recycle, they can reduce their carbon footprint, they can do 100 other things. One of them is give to charity. So if your message aligns and primes that identity, their core motivation to give, that is going to increase their response. To complete the formula, it consists of 6 parts. 2 of them have to do with your organization, the brand, and the issue you want to talk about. The rest, the other 4 parts, have to do with the donor. In this example that I'm going to share here, we created an ad for an organization that attends to the needs of military families. So starting with the brand, that's where we start in order to identify the key identities. So here, for this organization, it makes sense to focus on people who have some kind of military connection. So that's the identity we focus on. From that, we can find the personality trait that best fits with that identity. And conscientiousness is a great fit because of all the efficiency, effectiveness of the Army. And loyalty is a moral lens that perfectly aligns with all of that. Loyalty to the in-group, family and country in this case. And of course, as an emotion, attentiveness to the family needs. Okay? So that's the path that we can use in order to create a message that speaks to who the donor is. And you can see the execution here. Side by side, our military partners, we're working hard covering needs of our Afghan allies. Side by side, Afghan allies speak to loyalty, military partners speaks to identity, working hard to the conscientious traits, covering needs to attentiveness. Will you consider filling basic needs like food, diapers, and hygiene kits, attentiveness, the emotion, and of course the brand issue? Now, this formula and this approach, I don't know what you're thinking. Hopefully I'll get your thoughts soon, but some might be thinking that it's a bit restrictive, that it drowns creativity. Well, we found the opposite to be the case because it gives creativity direction. It sends it down the right path. And on that path, it flows freely because there is a million different ways you can execute on this path, on this selected path creatively. So it doesn't drown it, it guides it.
Yeah, I would offer up an art metaphor. I think the default sort of preference or bias is we want this blank canvas. And the concern with the blank canvas is twofold. But so to fill out the art metaphor, you might be working on some abstract piece of art, some modern art for your blank canvas, when your audience wants a bowl of fruit, realism, or vice versa. And so we see this message formula, this taxonomy is providing very useful constraints. If you have sort of guide rails, creativity can flourish there. In fact, those guide rails serve as kind of a guiding light. And so, as Kiki was noting, it is liberating for creatives, not constraining.
There is one problem though. There are just too many good message ideas. Like as an example, keeping this organization in mind, caring for military families. We start with a brand, then we brainstorm the identities that are relevant for this mission. And we talked about military connection, but it could be more specific, active duty or veterans. And say we choose veterans, and then we had chosen the path of conscientiousness, loyalty, and attentiveness in the previous slide, but we could have gone down a different route and use sanctity as the moral lens and respect, which can lead to many different messages down that road. In addition, we could have focused on a completely different identity to people who have strong national identity. And again, from there, you can pick a trait and different moral lenses and different emotions. And I don't need to explain this, but you can see how this can increase exponentially the number of messages that you have available. So which one do you put in market? Now, testing all of this in an A/B format in market, it's not realistic. It would take months, if not years. But there is this methodology. There is this tool, we call it the pretest tool, that allows you to test thousands of ideas in an A/B format in a space of weeks. And it all starts with a table like this, where each row represents a different concept, a different ingredient of the formula in this case. And you can have a row for each ingredient, or you can combine them just like we did here. And each column represents a different execution on that concept. So for identity, we can have the generic military connection or make it more specific to veterans, use the patriotic angle, and the same goes for the rest of the table. We brainstorm and we fill it in with all the message ideas that execute on the concept and that we want to test. Now, what this tool does is it combines every cell with every other cell from the rest of the rows. And it creates appeals, and it shows to people two different versions of appeals on screen. And they just have to tell us which one they prefer. So something like this: option 1 on the left, option 2 on the right. Each option has a completely different combination of the messages that we saw in the previous table. And you'll notice that we don't ask why. We only ask people to tell us what they prefer. And that's done on purpose because we're very good at telling people what we like and what we don't like, but we're not great at knowing the reasons why we like what we like. And it's not that we're going to lie. We are being honest and we'll give a reason, but it might not be the actual reason why we preferred a certain choice. Post-rationalization can lead us down a very wrong path. And honestly, we don't need that. We don't need to know why, because the table was built on solid theoretical concepts. So we already know why people make that, why they prefer that choice once they choose it. So we focus on what they can answer best to get the most valid responses. This makes it very easy for responders. Each person has to make between 8 and 10 choices. That gives us the power that we need to detect the winning messages for each row. So this is what you know at the end of this, which issue resonates best and which of the personality, moral frame, and emotion framing. And you could have 2 winning messages. It's possible. And that means that you can use both of them equally. So now you know what to say. And the next step is to actually find people to say to. And that's what we did. After we had this insight of the messages that work, we created social ads on Meta. First, we targeted people having one identity, the veteran families. There are affinities on Meta that allow you to do so. I know it keeps reducing the number of affinities, but it's still possible. So we targeted veteran families, and then we showed people the ad that was using the winning messages from that table. And we did the exact same for the other identity, which was also a winner, patriots. We targeted people who love the country, and we showed them the ad with the winning messages. And while this might be easier to do on social media, it's not impossible to do it offline. And I'll hand over to Kevin to give you the details on how. You're on mute. It's your turn.
Yes, I am on mute. I would encourage folks to submit questions on that pre-test tool that Kiki just ran through, but it is a great way to test thousands of different ideas in a very short window of time. And then you can have reduced your, well, you've increased the likelihood of success because you've vetted all of these ideas, and then you've got fewer to put in market in the testing way that Kiki was just sharing. And importantly, in those examples where we're running those ads, if someone clicks on that ad, we are going to assume that they match the profile that we wrote the ad for, and we are going to tag them in the CRM as being military connection and conscientious. Why? Because it's a pretty safe bet that if we continue to have messaging that matches that profile, they're going to be responsive because they were responsive to it the first time. So it's a way to put ads into the market with some targeting to get some efficiencies behind the scenes, taking advantage of what these various ad platforms know about their users, and then also just letting self-selection do its job. There is an additional way, I was going to say alternative, but it's really in addition to that, where you can instantly know the personality profile for your donors, and it's dirt cheap at 15 cents a name. We use third-party data as proxy to score each donor. So we'll take your file, we will match it with about 300 third-party data attributes, but not any random 300. This was our own product development work. And we're using that matched data to individual records to assign them scores for each of the big 5 traits. And then we further simplify the world by putting each person into their top scoring trait. And the reason this works is that third-party data, which is your life as a consumer, your lifestyle, your preferences, your habits, it is a reflection of who you are. We show up in the world as a reflection of who we are. That's really all third-party data is a snapshot of us showing up in the world. And so using that data, we in essence reverse engineer and avoid the pretty burdensome, almost insurmountable barrier of having to administer a personality assessment to everybody on your file. We also put this in the CRM. So that's a very simple thing to add a custom field. I don't care how crappy your CRM is, you can add a custom field. And now we have, for all of our clients, those big 5 traits are in a drop down. And if I want to send the next thing to the conscientious people, I merely make that selection within the CRM. As a part of this, you also get a cheat sheet. You get 1 per trait. So there's 5 cheat sheets, along with a personality workshop from the Donor Voice Behavioral Science team. And you'll learn how to tailor message and image and design to match the trait. And if you take that tagging process in combination with your own custom pretest tool so that you can have this bespoke research around your identities, your hypothesized identities, how personality, moral framing fits in, emotion, all of those pieces, you'll have your very own message formula. You'll know exactly what to say and who to say it to. And we have lots of proof of concept and evidence in market. We do this every single day for our clients. But it probably also just stands to reason that if I am matching the message to who you are, there's an increased likelihood that you'll see it in a very cluttered world. You'll give it attention, you'll agree with it, and you'll act on it. And that is, in fact, what we see across the board. All right, I think that wraps up kind of the formal part of all of this. And there were a couple of questions, Kiki, that I answered along the way, and now we've got a few more in here.
Okay. Are
you able to share what the pretest tool is called? Well, clearly we suck at branding because the pretest tool is called the pretest tool. That is the Donor Voice product. So, and hopefully the name's at least descriptive, if not creative. It is pre-testing or pre-vetting thousands of ideas that would take you forever and a day and cost a fortune if you were trying to do live A/B testing. So hopefully we answered that one live. Do you only use third-party data for the US or other countries as well? It is a US only product because we in the US have far less restrictions and regulation around use of third-party data. This seems overly simplistic to me. Don't people typically have more than one of these personality traits? Is it even better to score them with a number 2? Yeah, I think that's a fair, well, it's the first time anyone's called what we do simplistic, so I'm thankful that someone sees it that way, because we struggle to try to decomplicate the world. Well, we realize that people are messy and complicated, and so our fundraising needs to be a bit more messy and complicated, but not so much that it's overwhelming. So yes, every person, as Kiki was noting, has 5 scores, and you can be high or low or anything in between on each trait. It is also the case that we tend to be kind of trait dominant. Yes, you could be trait dominant on a couple traits where you're pretty high, not just compared to your other scores, but compared to national averages, which we have. And so there is always the possibility of having a multifaceted trait message where we're going to tailor to two different traits, but we are trying to simplify the world. And that is one of the turns that we've made to try to put everybody into a single top scoring trait. Anything else?
And just to say to that, that starting with something, some kind of tailoring is better than nothing. Yes, people are more complicated, but right now we don't tailor to any trait. So just tailoring to one of them is already a good start.
All right, let's see here. Done. Do the big five also direct how frequently you might mail someone, as in, are some personalities more likely to want less comms or more? No is the short answer. There's no correlation that we know of between communication preference, or I would say tolerance, on the frequency of solicitation. We have an entire point of view that's probably pretty non-traditional on this notion of cadence. I mean, the mail more, make more precept is wildly wrong. But I won't deviate too much on this session for that. I would guess the only comment would be that people who are high in agreeableness, they're susceptible to just saying yes all the time. These are yes people that we probably all sort of topically talked about. And one of the concerns, if you're a yes person, is that you feel a sense of guilt if you don't say yes, but all saying yes to everything also creates its own internal stress and strain. And so those are people who are more likely probably to have defense mechanisms around the communications, because they know that absent those defense mechanisms, for example, trying to write down and keep track of when they last gave to an organization, because while they want to be helpful and supportive, they don't want to feel taken advantage of. And that's how they can wind up feeling if they're constantly bombarded and constantly allowing that high agreeableness to rule the day. Let's see here. For me, the problem is the opposite of simplification. The variables you suggest are too many. We could probably manage 2 or 3 segments at most. Yeah, I think that's the more common kind of concern or response that we hear. And we would argue that yes, and Kiki just said it, I think. You're doing one size fits all right now. Whatever internal segmentation you might have, if it matches up with what the 99% of charities that we've seen, it's labels like active or lapsed, or you've got some president's council or your sustainer program. And those are internal handles, and they're useful for thinking about budget forecasts and maybe even some level of reporting, and maybe at a tactical level, how much we ask for for instance, but they don't tell you anything about why someone supports. And so if we can all agree that people are different, and that there is probably some option between one size fits all and 58 versions that is manageable and preferable, then I think that's the path we would encourage folks to go down. And so at bare minimum, go from one version to 2, but don't have that be the obligatory superficial active versus lapsed versioning where you have 2 words that are different. Put your toe into this water where we're going to have the difference be tied to who the person is. Fundraising has the way that fundraising is done is we always think about which people do I send this appeal to. So we've gone off and crafted this thing, and now we're deciding who to send it to. We want to put that on its head and ask, to this person here, what do I send them that they are going to react and in a positive way, agree with, and act on? And if you can create 2 of those people using these profiles, not 50 of these people, then you can find other people who match that profile, stack them on top, and there's your segmentation. It starts from the bottom up. Let's see here. Someone said agree to one of our answers, so that feels good. You showed ads in your examples. Do you segment this way across all donor comms, mail, email, marketing, personalized donation, and landing pages? Yes, is the short answer. The longer answer is that in all of our agency of record engagements or just project-based scope, there's going to be a level of pragmatism per the last question or comment rather. So that's our ambition and goal, but it's a crawl, walk, run kind of approach typically to get there. But yes, when we do direct mail, it is never one version. And importantly, going to two versions is not random assignment for who winds up in version A versus version B. That's how all A/B testing gets done. And when you randomly assign people to the control and you randomly assign people to the test, and I know that's sort of best practice, what we're inherently saying is that everyone's the same. And that the power of my message, which I've arrived at back in my workshop, and haven't thought about the supporter at all. I've thought about my issue A, B, and C. And then I'm just going to push that out there to a random subset and winner takes all. Most tests fail, we know this. And one of the reasons, not all the reasons, but one of the reasons that tests fail is that hidden underneath that failure is a pocket of people who preferred the test option. And so you have to have some structure in thinking about how you unpack that seeming mass of random people. And that's what we're proposing here, is that we actually know a whole lot about the people sitting on your file, even if your CRM says, all I know is their giving history and where they live. I'm gonna have to put on my old man reading glasses here. Can this tool be used to test ways to engage donors around bigger picture solutions, i.e. donating to the important and not just the urgent? I'm in animal welfare and all the ads are focused on urgent life-saving, which only reinforces the savior status quo and doesn't educate donors about the issue. You want to respond to that?
The tool can be used, the pretest tool can be used to test big ideas in any context. One of the ways we use it is to find the winning messages for our formula. But yes, you can use it to test other creative ideas too.
Yeah, and as a sidebar, urgency it might seem like a powerful motivator because you run an A/B test and you've got this kind of myopic focus on response rate. We know with high certainty based on our testing that urgency is a killer for long-term value. It's an external motivator. It has no staying power. And so to the person who asked that question, we have a very different take on how you make people psychologically satisfied so they don't just give tomorrow, but they give 5 years from now. And it's not going to be with give me $10 or the baby seal gets it kind of messaging.
There's even more nuance here, like if the emergency of the issue is real, urgency language helps around the issue. Urgency language around the issue helps. Urgency language around giving, like give now, don't miss the chance, like pressuring people to give in an urgent way, that backfires. And fake urgency backfires if there's no real emergency, but we create one because we came up with a deadline for the match offer or something. To answer the next question, I'm going to share the slide again.
Apologies that I missed this. How would current donors in your CRM list go through this process to identify their profiles? Is that what you were referring to, Kiki?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that this tagging process, as we refer to it, works, your donor file or any list for that matter, we take that list, we append third-party data, and again, it's about 300 different variables. But in that list of 300, it's actually about 40 or 50-ish for each trait. So there are 40 or 50 third-party attributes that we know match up pretty well with people who are high in openness, meaning people who are high in openness tend to show up this way in the world. As a for instance, people high in openness are wine enthusiasts, international travel people. They like organic food. They're probably not shopping as much at big box stores. They're going to have be members at museums or scientific publications, things like that. Just as a point of contrast, people who are high in conscientiousness, we have another 40 or 50 different attributes in third-party data world, which again are just how you show up, that we know correlate with people high in conscientiousness. Those people tend to show up in the world with they're politically more conservative, which doesn't mean Republican necessary, but more conservative. They are big box store shoppers. They are probably have gym memberships, domestic beer consumption, interested in watching sports on TV. And you can probably in your head, and just those two profiles that I painted for you, you get an image of somebody, and you can probably think of somebody who fits that profile. And even if you can't, you can probably agree those people seem pretty different just based on their interests and their lifestyle. And so we have those same profiles for all 5 traits. We put in Jane Doe or John Doe into the hopper to get matched up. And based on how well you match up on each of those traits that is attached to one of the big 5, will give you a score. So if you're matching on all of these variables that associate with openness, you're going to have a high openness score. If you match on very few, you'll have a low. And so that is, and then we have 5 scores, and we just find the one that's the highest, and we'll stick you into that bucket. Did that get at it, Kiki? You think anything else to add there?
No, I think that covers it.
And
Wait.
it's all automatic. It takes a day. It's all back and forth automation. And importantly, just to clarify, you don't get the raw data, the 300 attributes. You get the scores. Kevin and Kiki, great training. Thank you. For orgs outside the US, are there any proxies we can use to determine personality? Is the only way to actually have supporters take the test or the quiz? In the ad platforms, and it varies by ad platform, but thinking about Google display ads or meta ads, or if you're doing programmatic ads, in fact, there's a lot of variants, but they all know stuff about their users, and that data can be used as proxy. In Meta, for instance, we have a set of affinities that will look goofy if you just looked at the list, but that set of affinities is how agreeable people tend to show up on Facebook. So kind of like third-party data. So yes, there are some ways in digital to have some targeting behind the scenes to increase the efficiency, but then you're also going to rely heavily on self-selection. Put the agreeable ad out there, target it as best you can, and people that click on it are going to be more likely than not high in agreeableness.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that?
That was what I wanted to add. It rely on self-selection as the path forward.
Let's see.
And Julie, yes, you are high on openness.
There we go. That makes sense. Julie also wrote, we used to have scores on how responsive a person was to a particular type of solicitation. The A scores, which I guess could mean a variety of things, the A scores were typically the people who called to complain about being over-solicited, high agreeableness. Yeah, that makes sense. Super helpful. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, growing your email audience through Meta, other platforms that are also go-to. So hopefully that last answer helps satisfy that. You can use the ad platforms and what is referred to as second-party data, which means what is it they know about their people that they'll allow you to use for selection purposes. So that's behind the scenes targeting efficiency, but we can't stress enough the power of self-selection. So even if you had no ability to aim the ad at agreeable people versus open people, put them out there, and you are turning it over to the black box of Meta or any of these ad platforms, but the people who start to see that ad and react to it are likely to be a match for the profile you wrote for. And the algorithm, if it's good at anything, it's good at then trying to serve that up to more people like that.
And yes, you can grow your base, because this way you're going to reach people who align with your values and the mission, and not just people who have made a charitable gift in the past.
All right. I don't, you see any other questions in there?
No, I think that's all.
All right. We will give folks some time back here in the hour and say thank you again for joining us and for the active participation. We do appreciate all the questions. We think that's always a useful way to have these things go. And yes, the session is recorded and it's on demand. It will, one way or the other, we'll make sure that that on-demand link gets sent out.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.